Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 2022 film Blood Flower. It's a Shudder original, and it's coming to Shudder on Friday, September 8th. This is a Malaysian film. I'm going to let people know that up front because I know there are some people out there who really can't handle subtitles or really don't like subtitles. So just be warned, it's a foreign language film, Malaysian, so it has subtitles. This one is directed by, I'm going to do my best with the name, Dain Said, I think. Who has also done films Bunuhan, Return to Murder, Interchange, Dukun, and Iman Untuk Busan. Written by Said as well as Ben Omar, who wrote Iman Untuk Busan, so obviously had worked with Said before, and Nandita Solomon, who also wrote Interchange, so obviously also worked with Said before. Again, this is a Malaysian film, Shudder original, coming Friday, September 8th. So quick synopsis. Obviously, I don't want to give too much away because this is a no spoiler review, especially because A, it's a new film, at least to Shudder and in the United States, and B, it's not on Shudder yet when I'm putting this review out. So, it's about a boy. At first, it's about his family, but primarily about this main character boy who is living in a complex, apartment complex with his family that looks like it's kind of a little bit worn down, and so it actually has like an interesting look to it, a very horror film look to it. But he has a gift basically that was kind of passed on from his mother, and so he kind of perceives extra things. Now that's all covered like immediately in the movie, and then some things start to happen within the apartment complex, and you can only guess where things go from there. There is something in this film that will be very familiar to American audiences, a certain subgenre of horror that this goes hard at that people will find very familiar. So I know there's some people who will watch films like this and feel like they can't really connect with it because it is of a different culture. But this will not be that way because there's a lot of familiarity there, in my opinion. Although there is a lot of stuff that's also not familiar. Me personally, what I'm typically looking for films like this are what I'm not familiar with. I want to experience new things. I want like new lore and stuff like that. So you get a little bit of that, but you also get a bunch of familiarity as well. So it doesn't waste any time getting to the actual intrigue of the story. So I do appreciate that. It does a good job of setting up the premise pretty quickly, pretty effectively, and then also kind of hooking you in and making you say, okay, I'm interested. You've showed me enough interesting stuff here. You've piqued my horror interest, and I'm engaged. It does use a decent amount of CGI. Now, it kind of goes back and forth. Back and forth. Some of the CGI actually looks pretty good. Some of the CGI actually doesn't look too great. It's kind of wonky at times. It looks pretty good at other times. It's never awesome. But what you do need to realize is this is a Shudder original film, so the budget was not high. So just kind of have that expectation. But what I will say about the CGI additionally is that even though at times it doesn't look the best, what they're doing with it is very effective. Like the things they're choosing to put in CGI, obviously, yes, it would look better if it was practical effects, but the thought behind it, the creativity behind it, the horror behind it is very effective, and it hits the note that they really want it to. That said, it can also be that moment where with some people like me, you'll see the CGI looking a little bit wonky and it kind of takes you out of the experience a little bit. But for me, it actually wasn't too bad. I kept engaged. I could see the creativity behind it and what they were really going for. And it's interesting. They do a good job of bonding you to the main character very early on. I do feel like as a character, he was really well written, really well fleshed out, had a good, interesting backstory to him, had some good character development as well. Other characters, not as much. There actually, in my opinion, are too many characters in this movie. I do really wish they would have shaved that down a bit because some of the characters seem like they're just kind of there for a little bit and then gone. And it's kind of like they never even mattered. And I just feel like there are a handful of those types of characters that maybe they should have just shaved the cast down and shaved the runtime of the film down because it is like an hour and 40 some minutes. I think it's like an hour and 42 minutes with credits. And for that reason, the pacing actually does suffer an okay amount. Not a great amount, but a decent amount. So yeah, I would have liked if they would have kind of shaved down how many characters they had, because they didn't need them all. They really didn't. And it was just more time waster, in my opinion, more than anything. I really do like the camera work in this. Cinematography is quite nice. There are a lot of scenes with very smooth camera movements. That's one thing that I really love in film. Are those moments where like the camera's just like slightly moving, and it's just like very smoothly, slightly moving. Love those types of things. They do a decent amount of that when things are relatively calm, but then they do more of like a handheld, a little bit more shaky when things are more intense, or there's, significant movement on screen. So, appropriate. I felt like that was pretty good. They do a nice job of creating a drab, creepy atmosphere, and I do feel like a lot of it was achieved because of set design. The music does help, obviously, yes. The overall story of the film does help, yes. But I think it's really, well, and at times the acting actually does contribute to that well. But the set design does actually really stand out. Also, the fact that they chose to use that kind of like drab, like bleached color palette for the film, which sometimes gets a little annoying to me, but here I thought it worked pretty well because of the setting of it. It is kind of like these drab old apartment complex, so it's, it makes sense. So I was fine with that. There is some well-planned, effective horror imagery. That's one of my favorite things about this, and they put a lot in there, honestly. There are a lot of those nice kind of horror moments, whether they're CGI or not, because there is a little bit of practical. But just the concepts of like horror imagery that they came up with ahead of time and planned out for this, quite effective. They put a good amount in there, and it made me start thinking about how, in comparison to your typical American horror film, it's a lot more restrained with those moments, and it kind of feels like movies like this or like Satan Slaves, and Pedagore, stuff like that. They kind of go a little bit harder on those things. Harder by meaning like more frequent, and they're effective, so that's always entertaining. There's things happen at a pretty good pace, but it still feels like the story isn't moving anywhere. So going back to what I'm saying about having good horror imagery and things happening a decent amount, that is entertaining and that's engaging to a degree, but the story kind of feels like it doesn't move a whole lot. You get a lot of story in the beginning, and then it feels like after that, it kind of just gets really stagnant, and then it does something at the very end of the film. So for that reason, I think it really would have helped if they would have shaved the film down some and condensed that a lot more, along with shaving out some of the characters. But yeah, I mean, it's a problem that a lot of people have. So yes, it's got that entertainment factor because they're giving you tidbits of interesting things to visually look at. But from a story standpoint, you're just kind of like, how much story is there actually present? And I don't feel like there was a ton of story actually there that was thought of for the script. They just had more like concepts of like things they wanted to do, not an overall story that they wanted to go deep into and flesh out and have a big impact at the end. So, excuse me. I kind of feel like there are too many characters. Oh, sorry, I already said that. It feels like they tried to fuse two main ideas together for this movie, and they actually end up, instead of actually coming together well, they end up feeling like they're competing with each other. I don't know if other people have kind of seen that in films where it's kind of like you feel like they had two separate ideas for the script, and then they're like, well, maybe we can just put these two things together and it'll work out. That's what this kind of feels like in this movie, is that they had these two separate ideas and they're just like, we think we have the skills to put these together and they can really work together. And then it doesn't feel like they do. It kind of feels a little bit confused. It feels a little bit aimless at times. And then you just keep seeing like, okay, there's this aspect and there's this aspect. And I feel like they're butting heads. They're not really coming together and meshing well. So that was one of my other issues with it. And once again, this movie really, really, really did need to be shaved down. There are parts, especially late, middle, toward, and to the end, that are pretty drawn out, in my opinion. It does really feel like it's getting lagging So, yeah. But those are all my feelings on Bloodflower. Overall, I still thought it was a solid enough movie. I was between 2.5 and 3 stars, but I think there is enough stuff that's actually achieved for a lower budget film for me to go ahead and say 3 stars for it. But do know I was between the 2.5 and 3 because I did feel relatively conflicted on it. But this is where I would love to hear from you if you've seen the film, or if you go watch it and then you want to come back, put some comments down there. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you in between on it? And just give me like a sentence or two letting me know why you have that opinion. Because I just want to know the why. Because maybe there's something in this that I didn't really see, or something that you can add to it with one of your comments that'll kind of change the context of things for me. I don't know. It's possible. But anyway, thank you for checking this out. Do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would greatly appreciate that. Also, hit the notification bell button. That way you'll know when I'm putting up new videos each week, which I'm doing 3 a week at this point. But again, thanks so much for checking out this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.